Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Clarifying Catholicism. Ordinarily, we explore theological topics, but in this series, we investigate the writings of, in my opinion, the most important little-known philosopher of the 20th century, Xavier Zubiri. This is not a theological series at all whatsoever. However, if you want to do good theology, you'll need a good philosophical backbone first. So if you want to check out the rest of the episodes in this series, check the link in the description. Without further ado, on to the show. Here we are. We're approaching the end of our series on Xavier Zubiri's Sentient Intelligence. We can finally answer the question that he and other epistemologists have asked for centuries. How do we know things? Knowledge, according to Zubiri, is an expansion of our intellection. All intellection involves primordial and ulterior apprehensions, the latter of which is constituted by logos and reason. Knowledge is concerned with knowing what things are, or what a thing's being is. In the last couple of episodes, we've drilled into that being is not about what a thing is in itself, which is what the classical philosophers defined it as. Rather, it is a thing as it relates to other things. So, knowledge is a type of intellection, and it's specifically the kind of intellection that explains how things relate to each other. Also, in contrast to classical philosophy, knowledge is not a reaching for something that ends once we attain it. Otherwise, we would be satisfied with what a thing is once we reach an answer. There wouldn't be much doubt or skepticism. Thus, knowledge doesn't fully satisfy itself. Knowledge has a few key aspects. The first is objectuality. The word object is very ancient, coming from the Latin word objectum, which is composed of ob and jectum. Ob means to jut or jump out. It's what sticks out at you about something. Jectum means to throw against. Think of a word like eject. According to Zubiri, object in its most pure sense means that which jumps out at us when something is thrown against other things. Zubiri accuses ancient and medieval philosophers of focusing too much on the ob and less on the jectum, meaning they only seemed to care about what stood out of things rather than how that standing out emerged from a thing's interaction with others. This led to a flawed understanding that objects are defined as what things are in themselves rather than as they are in relation to other things. Now, since an object is defined by a thing's relation to other things, to understand the object, we have to know where the intellect places it in relation to other things. This position in relation to other things is called a thing's positum, which is Latin for place. Now, a positum that is apparent to everyone is called a fact, which is different than other kinds of intellections, such as feeling hungry or feeling hot, which people can internalize differently. For example, two people standing in front of a burning forest can agree about the fact that the forest is burning, but one person might feel hotter than the other. Now, when we pick a fact and use it to define something, we call that first fact a ground. For example, if we say the sun is the center of the universe, and say Mercury is the closest planet to the center of the solar system, Mercury's position rests on the ground that the sun is the center of the solar system. While we do use certain definitions as grounds to build more definitions on, the most basic grounds that form the basis for all our knowledge are ingrained into us as infants and children. Hence, every person's grounding depends on our culture, time period, and other contextual factors. And while we accept certain grounds to define other things, it is also the task of knowledge to analyze the strength and validity of those grounds that we began with. Basically, knowledge and its grounds aren't static. Rather, knowledge evaluates itself and modifies itself. These facts and grounds rely on the intellect, whose production of truth is the indicator that reality remains stable. Truth authenticates, meaning it converts raw stimuli into things placed in reality among other things. Concept fire is instinctively placed among things like heat. Truth conforms, meaning it connects things with each other once they're placed in reality. Fire causes heat. Finally, truth verifies or reasons once those connections have been drawn. Fire causes heat because of chemical reactions, And reason never stops searching for new connections and their verifications, meaning reason ultimately searches for a comprehensive knowledge of reality. All three of these truths, authenticity, conformity, and reason, produce what we call explanations of the world. And reason in particular constitutes comprehensive apprehension or comprehensive knowledge. Let's tie everything together. Number 1. Zubiri seeks to build a philosophical system to bridge the gap between the physical world and the metaphysical or psychological world that began with the pre-Socratics and continued into postmodern philosophy. He accomplishes this by asserting that there is no chasm between physical and intellective activities. All intellective activities are physical processes, just as smelling and tasting are physical processes. Number 2. He advocates for a universe whose laws are dynamic, though they are dependent on real content, which makes him a realist. Number 3. All living things, from plants to animals to infants to adults, are stimulated by real content. We call this stimulation primordial apprehension. Number 4. Only humans, however, can connect these stimuli together into a network called reality. The connection between stimuli is called an ulterior apprehension. Number 5. There are two types of ulterior apprehension. The first is called logos. Logos connects things that have been apprehended together. The connections drawn between things by logos is guided by our physical sense of towards or direction. Number 6. When we make these connections between things via logos, we make judgments. They can be as simple as thing A exists or thing A causes thing B. Number 7. Truth is the intellective moment of reality. While we might constantly be smelling, hearing, and seeing things around us, we aren't always intelligizing them. When we participate in intellectual activities, such as judgments, which are physical processes, our intellect produces truth. When connections between things and the logos are strong, the intellect produces truth. When those connections are weak, the intellect produces error. Number 8. Being is produced by the intellective placement of things among each other in the physical world. Because being depends on a thing's placement among other things, being is not static, but relies on the pre-existing apprehensions of other things. Number 9. Once the logos, aided by all the senses and sense organs, but especially towards and the intellect, places things among each other and connects them, our process of thinking does not cease. For we seek explanations for why things are connected, and we draw in apprehensions from all over the place to try and satisfy that search. This second type of ulterior apprehension is called reason, and possibility is the backbone of reason as it offers us options to satisfy its search. Number 10. Reason ultimately searches for comprehensive knowledge of all reality, and the resolution of this search depends on the way things are connected to each other, which depends on the amount of truth produced during that connection's formation. The intellective connections made by truth are dependent on prior judgments made via the logos, which connects things in reality to begin with. Those connections are entirely at the mercy of real content. Thus, knowledge depends on reason, which depends on being, which depends on truth, which depends on judgment, which depends on logos, which depends on reality, which depends on real content. Basically, a thing's explanation depends on the real content of said thing. But since we can never exhaust the totality of said thing, our search for a comprehensive explanation of reality, much less any one real thing, is endless. Basically, the real world is so rich that it not only inspires us to pursue comprehensive knowledge, but it is so rich that we will never reach that which we seek. Thus, knowledge is an infinitely expanding horizon that rests upon the real, but given the fundamental richness of the real, will never be exhausted. This series has been just the tip of the iceberg regarding Zubiri's sentient intelligence. Next episode, I'll talk about the significance of Zubiri's work, which you can find in the description. Until then, have a great day. God bless you.